Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 14 team selection. We really are at crunch time now with only 3 weeks left until the World Cup. Before we jump into the video, I'm just going to flash it above my head. Over 50% of you that watch these videos don't actually subscribe, and we are on the road to 50,000 subscribers. We only need about 2,500 more. So if you're watching this and you've not yet subscribed, I would massively appreciate it. Also drop a like on the video, but without further ado, let's jump to the video. So guys, we're wasting absolutely no time at all today, jumping straight into the team selection for Game Week 14. Game Week 13 was absolutely fine. I guess it was a small red arrow. That is now 3 red arrows on the bounce, but I'm still ranked inside the top 1k, 825th in the world. I mean, I'm just inside the top 1k, but to be honest, if you'd have asked me at the start of the season, would I take being in the top 1k going into the World Cup? Absolutely. So whilst, yes, I was very close to the top 100 and I've had 3 relatively poor weeks in a row, I need to look at my season as an entirety, and I'm absolutely delighted with the start. To be honest, I would have taken top 100k going into the World Cup, because I think that's a good position to be in. So regardless of your rank, we've got pretty much a fresh start coming from the World Cup onwards, from 17 onwards. So we can basically see it as 2 halves of the season. So going into Game Week 14, the team's actually in a really, really good position. The team value is stacking up very, very nicely. And I've actually got 2 free transfers. Now, what we need to think is we've only got 3 weeks left. So if you've got 1 free transfer this week, you'll only have 3 free transfers before the World Cup. And if you've got 2 like I have, then you'll only have 4 free transfers before the World Cup. And as a result, they're very valuable. So I'm not saying that if your defense looks really poor or you want to switch your keeper, you shouldn't do it. But you've got to think to yourself, if I've only got maybe 3 free transfers up to the World Cup, is making a goalkeeper switch the best use of that? Because realistically, with a goalkeeper, number one, it's very difficult to predict when they're going to get points, because sometimes they can keep clean sheets against tricky teams, get like a 12-pointer or save a penalty. And also, there's just not that same upside that there is bringing in a penalty taker or bringing in a player that could get you a brace. So whilst maybe the defence, I know a lot of people's defences could do with the transfer, I do wonder with only 3 weeks left and with some of the fixtures that those players have, unless it's a very attacking defender, I'm not a massive fan of making defensive transfers. I'm really trying to target those high upside picks. Definitely players that are on penalties if I can, and also players that have good data and I know have that sort of brace slash hat-trick potential. So that's sort of what I'm thinking going into the next few weeks. With respect to my team, lining up in a 3-4-3, I've still got the Pope and Trippier double up. I think if I kept them through Manchester United away and Tottenham away, I'll probably keep them both until Game Week 16. Again, Trippier's got such high attacking threat and so good for bonus, and Pope does make a few saves. They're playing for good defence in Newcastle. I don't feel like the upside's massively there to attack by taking out Pope or Trippier. So for the time being, both will stay. Post-World Cup, I think I'll probably get rid of Pope, but I'll probably keep Trippier because he feels like a bit of a Cancelo, James Trent. He's of that same mould, but of course he's cheaper. And because I've had a bit of a subtle flex here, I've had Trippier since Game Week 1. So I bought him at 5 million. So I had him for a very cheap price. And I've actually obviously managed to build up quite a bit of value on Trippier. So for me, selling him isn't an option. Cancelo, I do sort of like 5% of me wants to sell Cancelo because I really want KDB. And I think a triple attack of Foden, KDB, Haaland for the next 3 weeks could be absolutely massive. But you've got to think that would require 2 transfers, right? Because I'd have to take out Cancelo and Salah to bring in KDB. We'll talk about Salah in a second, but taking 2 really good assets out with good data and good fixtures, potentially for a -4 for some people, but for me it would be for using my 2 free transfers. It just feels like I'm maybe overthinking it and trying too hard. So whilst I do think I would probably prefer KDB to Cancelo, it's obviously not as simple as that. It's not a straight switch. So for now, Cancelo stays. And the next 3 fixtures for City are absolutely unbelievable. At the moment, my third defender is Doherty. Now, yes, I fully understand there's a very good chance Doherty doesn't start in Game Week 14. So I think he played something like 71 minutes in the Champions League. He wasn't great. Spurs weren't great. And sometimes Conte can be known to make a few switches when the team performs like that. However, I do think that Doherty has worked his way into the starting 11 for Spurs, and I do genuinely believe he is the favoured starting right wing-back for Spurs. And when Emerson's on the pitch, I still don't think he looks great at all. So I think at the moment, I would lean towards Doherty does start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for Paul O'Keefe's lineup. So if you don't know who Paul O'Keefe is, follow him over on Twitter. I always talk about him in my deadline streams. He essentially gives predicted lineups for Conte's team about 1 or 2 days before the deadline. They're often wrong, right? It is a prediction, but more often than not, he tends to be right. And I would tend to back, if I think Doherty's going to start and he also thinks Doherty's going to start, I would feel fairly comfortable. If we differ from each other, like if I think he's going to start and he predicts that Doherty won't, for example, then I probably wouldn't. So I guess this is to say for now, because it's a great fixture, because he's got great attacking numbers, and Spurs are just whipping in crosses left, right, and centre. They had something like 44 crosses in the Champions League game. I think the upside is there to keep Doherty and start him. If I have any doubts, I've got two options. I can take him out, but like I said, I'm not sure about defensive transfers at the moment. I just don't think that's a very valuable use, because most of the defenders with decent fixtures this week don't have the upside. Like a Ben White, yes, he did get an assist previously, but is that a high upside transfer? I'm not really feeling it at the moment. Or I can play Mark Gahey against Southampton at home. Southampton have looked a little bit better recently, but they have got a few key injuries. And also, it is a home fixture. And whilst Palace haven't been great defensively this season, I don't mind having to play him. So I think at the moment, what I'm leaning towards is starting Doherty. If I get some sort of news that he's not going to start, or if I'm at all worried that he's not going to start, I'll probably just bring Gahey in rather than use a transfer. If I am to use a transfer on Doherty, though, I'm probably looking at one of Ben White, Mikalenko/Tarkowski, even though Everton's data isn't great, and then Cresswell. The only issue with Cresswell is, of course, his most difficult fixture is this week. So if I brought in Cresswell, I would probably still start him, but I may even bench him for Gahey. So that's sort of the things I'm thinking about at the moment. For me, I'd rather not use a defensive transfer. I'm happy with the three defenders. I'm happy with Gahey and Castagna on the bench. Let's move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield, let's start with the player that is almost definitely going to be sold this week, and that is Jarrod Bowen. So I guess it's important to know, I don't think you need to sell Bowen. Arguably, if I had one free transfer and maybe an issue in my team, I wouldn't even have an issue keeping Bowen, right? Manchester United isn't a great fixture, but after that, as we've said, 2 home fixtures against Crystal Palace and Leicester, you are absolutely fine keeping Bowen. And I do think that Bowen's data has definitely improved. West Ham's data isn't bad for the season. I feel like they've been quite unlucky / poor finishing, but the XG created in most games would suggest that West Ham could definitely be placing higher than they are at the moment in the Premier League, and maybe Bowen could be on an upward trend. Now, the reason that I'm looking at potentially selling Bowen is, number one, he's no longer on penalties. And I do think one of the major things that one of the major reasons I brought in Bowen was that I was almost certain he would be on pens, and he has been on pens. He's obviously got 2, finished 1, obviously missed the other. So that was one of the major advantages, was that he was on pens. I'm pretty sure he won't be anymore. The other reason is he's sharing a lot of set pieces with Cresswell, so it's not even like he's on all corners and free kicks. Cresswell's actually taken a lot. It's usually Bowen from the right-hand side and Cresswell from the left-hand side. So Bowen takes the in-swinger, Cresswell takes the out-swinger. So he's sharing set pieces, no longer on pens, and his data's still one of the worst out of all of the midfielders that you could look at for the next 3. Even the likes of Almiron have better data. So I look at Bowen and I think the opportunity is there, considering he's fairly lowly owned. And again, ownership shouldn't really dictate your decisions. But if I sell Bowen and he absolutely pops off over the next 3 weeks, the only issue that's going to cause me is it's going to cause me a bit of regret because I've sold him. But he's not owned by many players. Like he was only at 20% last week, effective ownership at my rank, and I think a lot of people would sell him. So I would predict around my rank next week, it'll be at about 10%. So even if he gets 20 points, it won't harm my rank much. It will just harm my self-esteem, and it'll also make me regret making that decision to sell him. So at the moment, I'm looking at selling Bowen for those reasons. But again, it's more so because I've got 2 free transfers and I want to be a little bit aggressive with those transfers because the rest of my team's looking strong. At the moment for replacements, I do like Rashford and I do like Anthony. As a Manchester United fan, as you can imagine, I'm big on the Manchester United players. Manchester United are actually playing whilst I'm recording this. I'm recording this at halftime in the Europa League game. So I like the Manchester United options. I think the next 3 are fine. I think at the cheaper options, you've got like Eze, Gordon, Iwobi. There are some really great options. But I just think with that Nottingham Forest at home fixture, with the fact that Saka was rested in the Europa League, I'm looking at bringing Saka in ahead of Forest. I do understand he's got Chelsea away and Wolves away after that. So as a 3, I don't really like them. But I've got 2 options. I just keep Saka because he's probably still on penalties and Arsenal still put up good attacking data. Or I bring him in for Forest and then I sell him next week because I could roll a transfer so that I still have 2 transfers next week. And also next week, my team still looks really strong. So I might not even need the transfer. So I might be able to just do like a hokey cokey with Saka, bring Saka in and then either bring Bowen back or maybe move to someone like a Zaha if I really don't like the fixtures for Arsenal. I just think I want double Arsenal attack. And yes, Arsenal look pretty fatigued at the moment and Forest have been improving. I still think you need to look at the fixture. And on paper, Forest at home is a good fixture for Arsenal. So for all of those reasons, the most locked-in transfer for my team will be Bowen to Saka. I'm definitely not dead set on that. Just a reminder, I will be doing a deadline stream 2 hours before the deadline tomorrow on Saturday. So definitely tune into that and I'll tell you then whether I'm planning on doing the Bowen to Saka move. But at the moment, that move is most likely in my team. I think Foden's absolutely fine. A lot of people are asking me, do we need to sell Foden? There has been rumours that he's like fatigued, / there was the fever with Cancelo and Haaland, and then people saying that Foden had a knock, but I think Foden's fine. I think he was just getting a bit of a rest and a bit of rotation. He started every single Premier League game this season, apart from game week 13, and I know it was frustrating for a lot of people that brought him in for that. I would expect him to start the next three Premier League games. So for me, Foden is fine. I would not be selling Foden, and I would still feel perfectly happy advising you to bring Foden in this week. I still think he's the best midfielder to own in the game at the moment, bar none. I think he's absolutely the best midfielder to own in the game, so I would be bringing him in. Martinelli is getting absolutely flogged by Arsenal at the moment. They are playing him like every opportunity they've got. And again, I do think he's one of those players that is suffering slightly with fatigue. He was not rested in the Europa League, so I don't think he'll be benched in the Prem, but I do think that maybe World Cup Unlimited transfers team, we have a little bit of a think whether we want to go for both Martinelli and Saka, or maybe just go for Saka. I think that obviously once Smith Rowe's back, that will massively eat into his minutes. I do think Vieira's fantastic, and Nketiah can play on the left too. So they've got options there. For now, I think Martinelli's fine, and Nottingham Forest at home, like I said, is a great fixture. And then the fourth and final mid, another player getting a lot of discussion at the moment. I believe the most transferred out player this week, it is Mohamed Salah. Now, I sort of maintain a similar perception of this to Andy, Let's Talk FPL. Now, obviously, there's been a bit of banter with him captaining Salah and stuff like that. But I guess the issue that we have as content creators and just general FPL managers as well is when I look at this team, I don't see Salah as a priority. Now, if I could get to KDB, I'd sell Salah, almost definitely. But if I want to go from Salah to KDB, I'm already on a City triple up. And I also think Foden is fantastic value. So I can't get there. And then when people are saying he's not worth the money that you're outlaying for him, he's not. Absolutely, you are correct. But I wouldn't use the money. If I sold Salah for Zaha or for Saka, the money would just sit there anyway. So the decision I've got is, would I prefer Salah or Bowen? And I'm always going to say Salah. The data's better, Liverpool are better attack, the fixtures are better, and Salah's on penalties. So for the reasons maybe outside of Salah, I just don't want to sell him. It's not because I think he's a fantastic option still. In fact, almost definitely, unless we see something in the next couple, I may well go without him on my unlimited transfers over the World Cup. That's a decision to be made. It's just because I think there are other places where other players warrant a transfer out more than Salah. So for those reasons, at the moment, I'm not going to sell him. If Haaland is injured, which we're going to discuss in the next part, then Salah probably would be my captaincy option just because his data's good and he'll play 90 minutes and he's on penalties as well. So for now, Salah stays. Let me know down below in the comments what you're planning. My fifth midfielder is Andreas against Everton at home. I know a lot of people are saying you can't bench Andreas. Andreas is a fantastic option. Yes, he is a fantastic option. And yes, if I need to start Andreas, I have absolutely no issue starting him, but I also have no issue benching him. And I think the 7 attackers that I'll have once I make my transfers are all better than Andreas. I would prefer to start all 7 of my other attackers outside of Andreas. If I could start 8 attackers, I would probably bench Doherty and play 2 in defence, but you can't do that. By the way, in my actual team, I think Andreas is first sub. So don't worry about the bench order. I think Andreas is first sub. But that's the midfield. Let's move on to the final 3 attackers. If you're enjoying the video today, please do subscribe. Please drop a like on the video. We're going to aim for 2,000 likes on this video. And like I said, we're aiming for 50,000 subscribers before the World Cup. And I would massively appreciate it. And if you are looking forward to the World Cup, we'll almost definitely have some World Cup fantasy football content here on this channel. And I think that game will be going live very, very soon. So do make sure to subscribe for that. Moving on to the 3 attackers. It's all up in the air at the moment. Let's start with the only one that's almost definitely not going to be transferred out, and that's Mitrovic, right? Because he's fit, he's scoring, he's still on penalties, and to be honest, Fulham look pretty good, right? They don't look great from a defensive perspective, but they continue to score goals, and their data this season isn't bad from an attacking perspective. They're pretty leaky at the back, but I do think that Fulham have been really impressive in the Premier League. I was quite shocked, actually. I thought it would be another classic case where they come up and then go back down. I've actually been very impressed. The thing I would say with Mitrovic is Everton at home isn't an easy fixture. It's definitely not a bad one. I'd expect them to score. And then obviously it's Manchester United and Man City after that. So Mitrovic may be sold in game week 15. I do have a bit of money tied up in him, so that's something I need to consider. But for now, for the Everton game, when I've got other issues in my team, I think Mitrovic will stay. Let's talk about Haaland then. Almost definitely I'll be keeping and captaining Haaland unless we get news in the Friday press conference that Haaland's out, or we get early team news that Haaland is out. If he's out for 1 week, I'll probably still keep him. If he's out for 2 weeks, there's a real decision to be had because you'll lose, I think I'll lose like 0.3 million on him if I sell him and then buy him back in the unlimited transfers. But that is 2 weeks that you could have Kane ahead of Haaland. Now, one of those fixtures is obviously against Liverpool, but this week it's against Bournemouth. Would I prefer 2 weeks of Kane instead of... Well, it wouldn't be instead of Haaland, would it? It would be instead of Andreas, I guess, because if I don't make the move, Andreas would come into my starting 11. So would I prefer Kane instead of Andreas for 2 weeks? but also I would lose 0.3 million. That's sort of that debate to have if he's out for 2 weeks. If he's out for 3 weeks, then I think you have to say you sell him. Of course, you could do two things. You could go from Haaland to Kane, or you could go Haaland and Andreas/Bowen to KDB and a striker. So I could bring in KDB in that case, a player that I do really want. I guess the decision you have to make there is, if Haaland is out, does that make KDB a worse option? We saw last season, without Haaland, KDB can still do really well. It probably would mean that one of Foden, Grealish, or maybe Mahrez would play the false nine role, or maybe Bernardo Silva, maybe even KDB himself. Listen, it's a lot of hypothesizing. For what it's worth, I think Haaland will be absolutely fine. If you did miss the news, very briefly, Pep said he was fatigued. He said that he had a fever and he had a knock to his foot. So there were 3 reasons that Haaland was subbed at half-time in the Champions League. Like I said, for what it's worth, I think he'll play. If we get news before, I'll obviously, again, discuss it on my deadline stream, what I plan on doing with him. But for now, I'm hoping it's mind games. I'm hoping he's fine. He was recovering with the rest of the team, which would suggest that his fever wasn't sort of COVID related. It isn't a proper illness, which is good. And outside of that, I just think he'll be fine with the injuries and stuff. So for now, Haaland stays. The final player in my starting 11 is Bobby Firmino. Now, this is a really tricky one for me because when I brought Bobby Firmino in for game week 12, it realistically was a 2 to 3 week punt. So I just thought with the 3 fixtures that they've got against West Ham, Forest and Leeds, I really like them. And I thought due to the fact that Darwin still isn't fully fit, Klopp still doesn't seem to want to play him in every game. And due to the 4-2-4 or the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow diamond that they're playing, Firmino's getting a lot of minutes because they're essentially playing with 2 central players. So I thought for all of those reasons, I'm going to bring Firmino in. I'll be honest, it's absolutely flopped. He got a 2-pointer and a 2-pointer, despite playing quite a lot of minutes. And then he's gone and played 90 minutes in the Champions League. Now, reasons that I don't think Firmino will start. Again, he's been absolutely flogged recently. Playing 90 minutes in the Champions League isn't great, but he's very integral to their team. If they continue with the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow sort of diamond formation that they played in the Champions League, Firmino can either play up top alongside Salah or Darwin, or he can play in that number 10 role. And if they play the 4-2-4, again, Firmino can play up top. I think pretty much every formation they're playing at the moment suits having Firmino in it. So I guess it comes down to his recovery, which we're not going to know if Firmino's going to start or not. If he does start, it's a great fixture. Leeds don't look great defensively at the moment. I do think they've been unlucky not to pick up more points. It's one of those, if he starts, I'd probably want to keep him. But if he doesn't, obviously I'd rather sell him. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get early team news on the Liverpool game. So I'm looking at this now and I'm thinking, again, it's a similar situation to Bowen where not a lot of people have Firmino. So if I sell him and he does well, the only thing that's going to hurt is my pride a little bit and I'm going to regret selling him. It's not like I'm selling a player that's 90% owned that could really backfire. And again, there are quite a few players that I really like for the next 3. So Gabby Jesus is one. But again, I think that's a little bit short-sighted, especially if I'm bringing in Saka. I don't think I want the Arsenal tripler. I really still like Ivan Toney, despite being on 4 yellow cards along with Jesus. I still think Toney's a great option. The next 2 fixtures are really, really nice for Brentford. But the third one that I desperately, desperately want, and one of the main reasons I want to sell Firmino, it's another massive punt that could backfire, and it's actually Calvert-Lewin. The next 3 fixtures for Everton look really good on paper. He's played like just under 80 minutes, 2 games in a row now. He's looking really good. And I think Lampard's been talking up his fitness, saying that he's going to be fit for the World Cup if Southgate wants to take him. He's looking good. He's still on penalties as far as we know. And whilst his data hasn't been good this season because he's only played like 180 minutes, generally when Calvert-Lewin plays, his data tends to be pretty good. And he's always good for bonus points when he scores. So for all of those reasons, I think it could be a fun punt on Calvert-Lewin. So if I'm looking at my team now, 2 free transfers, I don't need to use both of them, right? I can use one and then roll the other through to game week 15, which is an option. Let's assume Haaland's fine. My 2 planned transfers at the moment is probably Bowen to Saka and Firmino to Calvert-Lewin. That would put my starting 11 in an incredibly strong position. And if for some reason we don't get news and Haaland does miss out, I get Salah captain. And like I said, Andreas will be first sub. And I'll just get Andreas to come on for Haaland, which is absolutely fine. And then if, for example, there's been rumours that Cancelo has a fever with Haaland. If Cancelo doesn't play or Doherty doesn't play, I've got Gahey coming in. So I feel like my bench can cover me this week to be pretty aggressive with those 2 transfers. So let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Bowen and Firmino to Saka and Calvert-Lewin? Would you make either/both? Are there any other players you think I should be considering? Final part for today's video is just to look at how those transfers would affect my team for this week, but also for 15 and 16 as well. So guys, as always, for this final section, I'm using the Fantasy Football Hub My Team feature. If you do want 30% off at Fantasy Football Hub, link will be in the description. That's sort of like an affiliate link, so I get a little bit of a kickback from it, but also you get access to what is a pretty cool site. So this is the way the team looks for this week if I do make those Saka and Calvert-Lewin moves, just to reinforce the fact that the Saka move is pretty much set in stone unless we get some news that would put me off of that. The second move of taking Firmino out is largely dependent on what the predicted lineups are and if we get any early team news and how brave I'm feeling. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards taking Firmino out for Calvert-Lewin. So let's say I make those 2 moves for Game Week 14. This is the way the team would look. Apparently, it's a 92% Game Week rating, which is decent, 96% over the final 3 weeks. If I move forward to Game Week 15... the team's fine, but I do obviously have a few clashes. So I've got double Arsenal attack against Chelsea away, and I've also got Salah and Doherty playing against each other. Now, Doherty's not an issue because I don't have to play Doherty. I can play Gahey, but also I can bring in Mitrovic for Gahey and actually just switch to a 3-4-3, right? So let's say I actually line up like this. I would probably want to take Mitrovic out. And yes, he could get a penalty against anyone, but I feel like for the final 2 weeks, it makes sense to make that switch. And I do think there are a few decent options. So I could switch to Tony, but of course he's got one decent fixture, one slightly tricky fixture, hasn't he? It's Nottingham Forest and City, is it? No? Yeah, Nottingham Forest and City in 15-16. So that doesn't really solve my problem because it causes an issue the week after. Also, he's on 4 yellows, isn't he? So he could pick up a yellow against Nottingham Forest and miss the City game. I could bring in Solanke, assuming he's fit by Game Week 15, because he's got Leeds and Everton, which I think are 2 really nice fixtures. If Martial is fit, I think Martial could be a really cheeky option, right, against Aston Villa and Fulham for the final 2. So there are a few options in there. I don't actually know at the moment who I would lean towards. Maybe if I don't bring in Calvert-Lewin for Firmino in Game Week 14, maybe I bring in Calvert-Lewin for Mitrovic in Game Week 15. But I've got that option there. And outside that, the 11's fine. And to be honest, I don't mind playing Saka and Martinelli against Chelsea away. So my current plan would be to probably roll the transfer in 15. Whilst I do think there's upside to attack, I think Chelsea could concede. I think Salah's fine because he's got Southampton at home in 16. The rest of the team's fine. So I'll either make the Mitrovic move or I'll roll. Let's say I'll make the Mitrovic move for now because I think I would lean towards that. So I would go into 16 with a better striker instead of Mitrovic and 1 free transfer for that final game week. The team largely is looking fine, right? Calvert-Lewin, Haaland, Salah, Foden, Saka, Martinelli, Gahey, Doherty, Cancelo and Pope are fine. If I don't want to play Doherty, I can play Castagna against West Ham, which I'd probably do, or I can play Trippier against Chelsea at home. So I don't need a transfer in Game Week 16 because I would have a better player rather than Mitrovic. So that sort of drives home the point that I think at the moment the plan is Saka in for Bowen, Calvert-Lewin in for Firmino. In Game Week 15, Mitrovic out for a better striker. At the moment, I don't know who I would go for in that position. And then in Game Week 16, I would basically be left with this team plus a slightly better striker for Mitrovic and then 1 free transfer to take 1 final punt before we go into the World Cup with unlimited transfers. So I think the next 3 weeks are looking really strong. I don't see many places that I desperately need transfers. It's why I feel like I can be aggressive in Game Week 14, use both my transfers, even if I get an injury in 15. If I have to play Mitrovic or if I have to play Gahey or Doherty, I don't mind doing that. And I'm still going to have a free transfer. So that's the way the team looks. As always, let me know what your dilemmas are down below. For the first sort of half an hour to hour of the video going live, I reply to most comments and I try to reply to comments throughout the day. And obviously, if you see a comment that you think you can help someone out with, do feel free to answer the question for me and chat in the comments as well. It's nice to see you guys helping each other out. And also, like I said, make sure to drop a like on the video. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 14 team selection / transfer plans. As always, I don't lock in my team until last minute. So if you do want to find out what my decisions are for this week and you want any last minute advice, do tune into my deadline stream. It'll be going live at 9 a.m. as always on Saturday morning, 2 hours before the deadline. We talk about early team news. We talk about through my team. I answer some of your questions as well. Basically everything you need and more just before the deadline. So do tune into that. Make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.